The checks are about to look different, and I'm not talking about a few dollars here and there. We're looking at the kind of changes that could reshape retirement planning for millions of Americans. Now, before anyone starts celebrating or panicking, let's cut through the noise and talk about what's actually happening with Social Security in 2025. Here's what you need to understand. The cost of living adjustment is coming, and while it might not be the massive number some headlines are throwing around, it's significant enough to matter in your monthly budget. We're talking about real money that could help cover rising costs at the grocery store, the pharmacy, and everywhere else prices have been climbing. But there's more to this story than just a percentage increase. The Trump administration has signaled potential policy shifts that could affect everything from how benefits are calculated to when you might want to claim them. Some of these changes could work in your favor, while others might require you to rethink your strategy. And that's exactly why we need to break down the facts, separate them from the political spin, and figure out what this actually means for your retirement security. Let me start by telling you something that might surprise you. Social Security isn't just a government program that runs on autopilot. Every single year, there are adjustments, recalculations, and policy discussions happening behind the scenes that directly impact how much money lands in your bank account. And right now, with a new administration settling into Washington, we're seeing proposals and changes that haven't been on the table in years. Some of these ideas have been floating around policy circles for decades, but they're finally getting serious attention, and that means you need to understand what's coming down the pipeline. The 2025 cost of living adjustment was announced at 2.5%, and I know what some of you are thinking. That doesn't sound massive at all, especially when you've been watching your grocery bills climb month after month. But here's the thing about COLAs that most people don't realize. Even a seemingly modest percentage increase translates into real dollars that compound over time. If you're receiving the average Social Security benefit of around $1,900 per month, that 2.5% boost puts roughly an extra $47 in your pocket every single month. Now multiply that by 12 months and you're looking at over $560 more per year. That's not pocket change. That's a couple of utility bills, several trips to the pharmacy, or a significant chunk of your annual property tax. But the COLA is just the beginning of this story. And frankly, it's the part that gets the most attention because it's straightforward and easy to understand. What's happening behind that headline number is far more complex and potentially far more impactful for your long-term financial security. The Trump administration has put Social Security reform back on the national agenda, and unlike previous discussions that were mostly political theater, there seems to be genuine momentum this time around. We're hearing proposals about eliminating federal taxes on Social Security benefits, adjusting the retirement age calculations, and changing how benefits are calculated for people who have a mix of government and private sector work history. Let's talk about the tax elimination proposal first, because this one has gotten a lot of attention and for good reason. Right now, depending on your income level, up to 85% of your Social Security benefits can be taxed as ordinary income. Think about that for a second. You spent your entire working life paying into this system through payroll taxes. And then, when you finally start receiving benefits, the government taxes them again. The thresholds for this taxation haven't been adjusted for inflation in decades, which means more and more retirees are finding themselves subject to these taxes, even though they're not what anyone would consider wealthy. The proposal on the table would eliminate federal income tax on Social Security benefits entirely. For someone receiving $30,000 a year in Social Security and paying taxes on 85% of that amount, we're talking about potential savings of several $1,000s annually depending on your tax bracket. Now, this sounds fantastic on the surface, and for many retirees, it would provide genuine relief. But here's where things get complicated, and this is why you need to pay attention to the details rather than just the headlines. Social Security is funded through a combination of payroll taxes and, yes, income taxes on benefits. Those taxes on benefits actually flow back into the Social Security Trust Fund. If you eliminate that revenue stream without replacing it with something else, you're potentially accelerating the timeline for when Social Security faces funding shortfalls. The Social Security trustees have been warning for years that without changes, the trust fund reserves could be depleted by the mid-2030s, at which point the system would only be able to pay out about 80% of scheduled benefits. Eliminating taxes on benefits without a corresponding revenue replacement could move that deadline closer. So the real question becomes, what's the trade-off? Is there a plan to replace that lost revenue? Or are we looking at a scenario where short-term relief comes at the cost of long-term stability? These are the kinds of questions that don't always get answered in campaign speeches or press releases. But they matter enormously to anyone who's counting on Social Security for the next 20 or 30 years. Then there's the ongoing conversation about the retirement age, and this one tends to make people nervous because it touches on something deeply personal. The full retirement age has already been gradually increasing based on when you were born. For anyone born in 1960 or later, full retirement age is 67. But there have been proposals floating around Washington for years to push that even higher, potentially to 69 or 70 for younger workers. The argument from a policy standpoint is straightforward. People are living longer than they were when Social Security was created in the 1930s. So it makes sense that they would work longer and claim benefits later. From a purely mathematical perspective, this helps the solvency of the system because people would be paying in longer and drawing benefits for fewer years. But here's what that argument often misses. Not everyone has the same life expectancy, and not every job allows you to work comfortably into your late 60s or 70s. If you spend your career doing physically demanding work, whether that's construction, nursing, manufacturing, or any number of other occupations, your body might not cooperate with a policy that expects you to work until 69. And the data shows pretty clearly that life expectancy gains haven't been evenly distributed across income levels. Higher earners are living significantly longer than lower earners, which means raising the retirement age has a disproportionate impact on the people who can least afford it. The current proposals from the Trump administration haven't explicitly called for raising the retirement age for current retirees or those close to retirement. Most reform proposals include grandfather clauses that protect people above a certain age, typically 55 or older. But if you're younger than that, or if you're concerned about the long-term viability of the system for your children or grandchildren, this is something worth watching closely. Another area where we're seeing potential changes involves the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. These are two rules that affect people who receive pensions from jobs that didn't pay into Social Security, typically government employees, teachers in certain states, and some public safety workers. The WAP can reduce your Social Security benefit if you also receive a pension from non-covered employment, and the GPO can reduce or eliminate spousal or survivor benefits in similar situations. These provisions have been controversial since they were enacted because many people feel they're being unfairly penalized for public service careers. There's been legislative effort for years to repeal or modify these rules, and with new leadership in Washington, there's renewed hope that something might actually get done. If you're affected by WEP or GPO, you should know that complete repeal would come with a significant price tag, somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 billion over 10 years, which is why, despite bipartisan support, it keeps getting stalled. What's particularly interesting about the current moment is that we're seeing a convergence of political will and fiscal necessity. The Social Security Trust Fund situation isn't going to fix itself. And every year that passes without reform makes the eventual changes more dramatic and potentially more painful. There's an argument to be made that acting now, while the system is still solvent and adjustments can be gradual, is better than waiting until we're facing an immediate crisis. But there's also legitimate concern that rushing into major reforms without fully understanding the consequences could create new problems while trying to solve old ones. Medicare premiums are another piece of this puzzle that doesn't get enough attention. Most people don't realize that your Medicare Part B premium is automatically deducted from your Social Security check. For 2025, the standard Part B premium is $185 per month. When you get a COLA increase, but your Medicare premium also goes up, the net increase in your actual check can be pretty small. There's a hold harmless provision that prevents your Social Security check from decreasing due to Medicare premium increases, but that only helps if your full COLA is larger than the premium increase. If you're a higher earner subject to income-related monthly adjustment amounts, you could be paying substantially more than the standard premium. The broader economic context matters here too. We're living through a period of persistent inflation that's affecting everything from housing costs to healthcare to basic groceries. The official inflation numbers that determine COLA increases are based on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. But many economists and senior advocates argue that this doesn't accurately reflect the spending patterns of retirees. Seniors typically spend a larger portion of their income on healthcare and housing, both of which have been inflating faster than the overall CPI. There have been proposals to change the inflation measure used for COLA calculations to one that better reflects senior spending patterns, but that change hasn't gained enough traction yet. What all of this adds up to is a situation where the headlines about raises and rule changes are just the tip of the iceberg. Yes, you're getting a 2.5% COLA in 2025. Yes, there are serious proposals being discussed that could affect taxation, retirement age, benefit calculations, and more. But the devil is absolutely in the details. And those details are still being hammered out in committee rooms and negotiations that most people never hear about until decisions are already made. That's why staying informed isn't just about watching the news or reading headlines. It's about understanding how these interconnected policies affect your specific situation and being prepared to adjust your planning accordingly.